Thank you, Mark, for the introduction, and welcome to Sabbath Services, everyone. It's been a long time since I've been here, almost a month, but I'm back now, and it seems like the last time I was here, I spoke to you here also. Hope you're all enjoying the nice cooler weather. Certainly is a change of the seasons right now. While I'm giving the sermonette here, I'm going to give a slideshow here so you can look at some pictures to have an understanding of what I'll be talking about. And I think the pictures were a little bit blurry before. I'm not sure how they look now. But I was thinking about this, like a long time ago, I've always wanted to see the mountains. And have anyone here ever seen the mountains at a young age? For me, I remember as a kid, the first time I saw the mountains, when I was 13 years old. I went to Florida with my aunt and uncle and cousins, and that was my first time I ever saw the mountains when traveling to Florida. Now, it was at nighttime, so for most of the trip, I guess we left at midnight, so I didn't really see much of anything, and we drove straight through because we didn't want to stop anywhere. Our main goal was to travel to Florida, so I really didn't see many mountains. And then I didn't see the mountains again until I started going to Florida for the Feast of Tabernacles, after I graduated from high school. But then, again, of course, we never stopped in the mountains. We just drove straight through. Our main goal was always to get to Florida, and I love the ocean. The first time I really got to explore mountains was when I went to Hawaii for the feast, and I got to go there and explore the mountains in Hawaii. But the first time I really got a chance to spend the night in the mountains and explore and do some hiking was when I went to Gatlinburg in 2012 with my wife. Now, my wife and I just got back from observing the Feast of Tabernacles in the mountains. We were in Yellowstone National Park, as you know, is very beautiful. And the Grand Tetons are just south of Yellowstone National Park, which is known for its beautiful mountains. But boy, let me tell you, when we drove to the Teton Mountains, that really blew us away, because when you're driving, you see the mountains in the front of you, and they're so big, and you just want to keep on driving to get there, but you're not getting there fast enough. So you don't get tired at all driving to the Grand Tetons, even though it's like an hour drive from Yellowstone to the Grand Tetons. But when we got to the Tetons, really close, it really wowed us immensely. So just imagine how exciting it is in real life to be there. And to be there in real life, the pictures don't really do justice. You have to really be there. So we went to the Grand Tetons and we enjoyed it there. And then after spending a week there at the Grand Tetons, the Yellowstone National Park, we drove 6 hours north to Glacier National Park. And driving there, really between Yellowstone National Park and Glacier, there's really nothing there except Bozeman. And you just kind of fly by that city really quick. And it's just all mountains driving there. And what you're seeing here on the screen here are some pictures of the mountains that we saw in Glacier National Park and Grand Tetons and Yellowstone. Also over there, we see some wild animals too, like the mountain goats, bison, bear. We saw a grizzly bear, pronghorn, wolves. We saw the wolves we couldn't really see except with our binoculars because they like to be away from humans. And we saw a lot of deer and elk over there too. Now, man has always been excited by mountains. I'm sure, like as I was as a kid, I'm sure many of you have been excited since you were kids about being in mountains. The tallest mountain in the world is Mount Everest. And no man, in fact, it's so high, no man ever safely climbed that Mount Everest until Sir Edmund Hillary did that in 1953. In fact, it's so dangerous to climb Mount Everest that since 1923, according to the Himalayan database, 295 people have tried climbing that mountain, and only 5,000. I'm sorry, that doesn't make any sense what I just said. 5,294 people have, since Edmund did it, Hillary, 5,294 people have been successful in reaching the summit of Mount Everest. So not many people have been successful since 1953 in climbing Mount Everest, only 5,294. So obviously it's a very hard and dangerous mountain to climb. Now mountains are also in the Bible. It plays a big role in the Bible. Genesis 8, verse 4 tells us that Noah's ark came to rest on the mountains of Ararat. God told Abraham to go to Mount Moriah to sacrifice his son, Isaac. God gave Moses the 10 Commandments at Mount Sinai, and Jesus Christ spoke at the Mount of Olives. King David wrote in Psalms chapter 90 and verse 2 about how old mountains are in this world. He writes, and this in the New Living Translation, "Before the mountains were born, before you gave birth to the earth and the world, from beginning to end, you are God." So he's comparing how old this world is before even the mountains were born, that God had created the world. And we know mountains are older than any of us. But the Bible also speaks about mountains in prophecy. Specifically in prophecy, it speaks about Mount Zion. Let's turn to Isaiah chapter 2, and we'll read in verse 2 and see what it says about Mount Zion. Isaiah chapter 2 and verse 2. And Isaiah wrote a prophecy. "Now it shall come to pass in the latter days that the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established on the top of the mountains, and shall be exalted above the hills. And all nations shall flow to it, and many people shall come and say, Come and let us go to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob. He will teach us his ways, and we will walk in his paths. For out of Zion shall go forth the law and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. And he shall judge between the nations, and shall rebuke many nations. They shall beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore." How many times have you read that verse about how God shall establish his house upon the top of the mountains? He's trying to give us a visual there about how great God's kingdom is going to be. It's going to be top of the mountains. How high is it going to be? Well, as you can tell from some of these pictures, mountains can be pretty high. In some of these pictures you can see that we were so high in the mountain that you're looking down on the road, and the cars look like little toy Matchbox cars. The people look like little dots. And you can see the mountains, it's so high up, you can see clearly around you. And you are like amazed at what you can see all around you. And I think this is why God used the mountains in his prophecy as a metaphor. God's kingdom is going to be set so high that everyone is going to be able to see God's kingdom. Just like when you're out there, out west, and you're looking at those mountains, at those glaciers in Glacier National Park, when you're on the ground, you can see those mountains from afar off. And let me tell you, when we were driving to the Glacier National Park, we could see the mountains as we got closer and closer in the foreground. So this says a lot of stuff about God's kingdom. It's going to be powerful. It's going to be big. It's going to encompass the whole world. This is God's view of the kingdom. And because he'll be up there, his house will be so clearly seen, he'll clearly see all of us and be able to clearly judge the people righteously from his kingdom. And I think God's kingdom will be even better, more beautiful, even more glorious, more majestic than what the mountains that we saw out there in Yellowstone and Grand Tetons and Glacier National Park. And David wrote about the kingdom also, about how big it's going to get. Turn to Daniel chapter 2. In Daniel chapter 2, what happened was King Nebuchadnezzar had a dream, and no one could interpret the dream except Daniel. So Daniel started interpreting the dream about what the head represents, that represented King Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom of Babylon, and it goes down to the legs to the Roman Empire. But notice in chapter 2, verse 44, what happens in the last days. Chapter 2, verse 44. And in the days of these kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which will never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people. It shall be break in pieces, and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. So in this scripture right here, in this prophecy, there's a point being made that God's kingdom is definitely going to be as big and bigger than any mountain that man has ever seen. Even bigger and more people more in awe than Mount Everest. It'll be a permanent kingdom. People will be completely in awe of God's kingdom, and they will learn from God's way. As Isaiah chapter 2, it says, the law will go forth from God's kingdom, from Mount Zion. People are going to be learning about God. So what we learned today is the mountains, they're just natural, created, majestic features that God had put here on earth for us to see and to enjoy. In the Bible, God's kingdom is being compared to these mountains here on earth, but even better than the mountains, because his kingdom will be more magnificent and greater. God is going to be compared to being on top of a mountain, because he will be able to see clearly from that mountain and judge the nations and judge the people and nations rightly. So let us remember, the next time we are in the magnificent view of a mountain, remember the scriptures where God said, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of Jacob's God. There he will teach us his ways, and we will walk in his paths. For the Lord teaching will go out from Zion. His word will go from Jerusalem. Have a wonderful Sabbath day, brethren.